From a star who changed his entire appearance to avoid typecasting to a creator who publicly disowned his own show, A Man Called Hawk harbored bizarre behind-the-scenes secrets that rivaled its on-screen action. This short-lived 1989 spinoff featured future superstars in their breakout roles, jazz legends composing its theme, and controversies that still spark debate decades later. Fact 1. The creator hated his own show. Robert B. Parker created one of crime fiction's most iconic characters when he introduced Hawk in his Spencer novels. But when the character got his own television spin-off in 1989, Parker couldn't have been more disappointed with the results. The author publicly denounced A Man Called Hawk in ways that were both blunt and uncomfortable for everyone involved. During one particularly memorable public appearance, Parker was asked about the show and responded with a cringe-inducing, "Eek! I hope you all missed that," making it crystal clear how he felt about the adaptation. He went even further in other interviews, calling the series abysmal and explaining that he fundamentally disagreed with the entire premise of giving Hawk a standalone show. Parker's main criticism centered on a creative challenge he'd always faced with the character. He admitted that he couldn't write from Hawk's perspective, which was precisely why Hawk worked so brilliantly in the novels as Spencer's enigmatic partner. The mystery surrounding Hawk's thoughts and motivations was essential to what made him compelling on the page. By placing Hawk front and center as the protagonist of his own series, the show removed that deliberate ambiguity and forced writers to explain things about the character that Parker believed should remain unknown. The author felt this fundamental misunderstanding of what made Hawk special resulted in a show that betrayed the essence of the character he'd so carefully crafted over multiple best-selling novels. Parker's harsh public criticism of the series created an awkward situation for everyone involved in the production, especially Avery Brooks, who had won widespread praise for his portrayal of Hawk on Spencer for Hire and was trying to carry an entire series on his shoulders. Fact 2. Star Trek forced a dramatic hair change. When Avery Brooks landed the role of Captain Benjamin Sisko in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, just a few years after A Man Called Hawk ended, he faced an unusual problem that most actors never encounter. Brooks had become so closely identified with his appearance as Hawk, complete with a shaved head and distinctive goatee, that he needed to dramatically alter his look to avoid constant comparisons between the two characters. The solution was striking and deliberate. For the first 3 full seasons of Deep Space Nine, from 1993 through 1995, Brooks wore a full head of hair and kept his face completely clean-shaven, creating a visual appearance that couldn't have been more different from Hawk's iconic look. This wasn't a minor styling choice, but a calculated decision to help audiences see Captain Sisko as his own character, rather than Hawk in a Starfleet uniform. The strategy worked for several seasons, but by season 4, Brooks successfully negotiated with the show's producers to bring back the shaved head and goatee that had become his signature look. The change happened during the 2-part episode The Way of the Warrior, which introduced Worf as a series regular and marked a significant tonal shift for the show toward darker, more serialized storytelling. Once Brooks made the change, Captain Sisko took on a more commanding and intense presence that many fans consider the character's definitive look. The irony is that by trying so hard to distance himself from Hawk initially, Brooks proved he could embody completely different characters regardless of his appearance, and the eventual return to his preferred look only strengthened Sisko's iconic status in the Star Trek franchise. Fact 3. Birthday twins played father and son. One of the strangest coincidences in A Man Called Hawk involved a birthday connection that nobody could have planned. Avery Brooks and Moses Gunn, who played Hawk, and his mentor figure, known simply as Old Man, shared the exact same birthday, both born on October 2nd. This remarkable synchronicity becomes even more interesting when you consider the nature of their on-screen relationship. In the series, Old Man served as Hawk's father figure and spiritual guide, someone who had been part of Hawk's life since his youth in Washington, D.C. The character was written to be significantly older than Hawk, representing a previous generation and embodying wisdom earned through decades of life experience. The show regularly emphasized this generational gap through their interactions, with Old Man offering sage advice and historical perspective that only someone much older could provide. Yet behind the scenes, both actors were celebrating their birthdays on the exact same day each year, a detail that adds a peculiar layer to their mentor-student dynamic. Moses Gunn was indeed older than Avery Brooks in real life, having been born in 1929, while Brooks was born in 1948. But the shared birthday created an unusual connection between them. Gunn was a highly respected stage and screen actor who had appeared in everything from Shaft to Roots, and his presence lent gravitas to the short-lived series. The birthday coincidence was the kind of trivia that cast and crew members would have certainly noticed and likely celebrated together during production. It's one of those random facts that makes you wonder about the odds of casting two actors for a father-son type relationship who just happen to share the same birth date, separated by nearly 2 decades. Fact 4. A launching pad for future stars. A Man Called Hawk may have lasted only 13 episodes, but it served as an early career stepping stone for an impressive roster of actors who would go on to become major Hollywood stars. The show's guest cast reads like a who's who of future A-list talent, all of whom appeared in small roles before achieving widespread fame. Angela Bassett, who would later earn Academy Award nominations for What's Love Got to Do with It and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, appeared on the series early in her career. Wesley Snipes, who would become a major action star through the Blade trilogy and films like Demolition Man and White Men Can't Jump, also guest starred before hitting it big. Samuel L. Jackson, now one of the highest-grossing actors of all time, made an appearance before his breakthrough roles in Jungle Fever and Pulp Fiction transformed him into a household name. Charles S. Dutton, who would go on to star in his own sitcom, Rock, and earn multiple Emmy nominations, appeared on the show during this same period. Delroy Lindo, who would later deliver memorable performances in Spike Lee films and earn critical acclaim throughout his career, was another guest star who found much greater success after the show ended. This concentration of future talent in such a short-lived series is remarkable and speaks to the show's commitment to casting skilled African-American actors at a time when opportunities were far more limited than they should have been. These actors were all talented professionals even then, but A Man Called Hawk captured them at a unique moment, right before their careers exploded into mainstream recognition. Looking back at the guest cast now feels like watching a time capsule of extraordinary talent waiting to be discovered by wider audiences. Fact 5. Jazz legends created the theme music. The music of A Man Called Hawk wasn't just background noise, but a carefully crafted element that involved some of the most respected names in jazz. Avery Brooks, who wasn't just an actor but also an accomplished musician, co-wrote the show's theme music alongside 2 legendary jazz figures, Stanley Clarke and Butch Morris. Clarke was already a celebrated bassist and composer who had helped pioneer jazz fusion and worked with everyone from Return to Forever to recording his own successful solo albums. Morris, whose full name was Lawrence Douglas Butch Morris, was an innovative cornetist and conductor who would later become famous for developing conduction, a vocabulary of gestures for spontaneous musical composition. Having these 3 talents collaborate on the theme, music gave the show a sophisticated musical foundation that elevated it beyond typical television scores. But Morris's involvement didn't stop with the theme. He also composed most of the incidental music that played throughout the episodes, giving the series a consistent jazz-infused soundscape that reflected Hawk's character and the show's urban setting. The music helped establish mood and atmosphere in ways that aligned with the show's attempt to create something more thoughtful and culturally grounded than a standard action series. Brooks himself was a trained musician who had studied at the American Conservatory Theater and regularly incorporated music into his understanding of character. So having creative input on the show's sonic identity made perfect sense. The jazz elements weren't just stylistic choices, but reflected a deliberate effort to root the show in African American musical traditions and give it an authentic cultural voice that would resonate with the characters' background and sensibilities. Fact 6. Canceled. After just 13 episodes. A Man Called Hawk premiered on January 28, 1989 as a mid-season replacement, which is television industry terminology for a show brought in to fill a time slot after another program has been canceled or moved. The series was given a Saturday night time slot, which historically has been one of the most challenging nights for television because fewer people stay home to watch TV on Saturday evenings compared to other nights of the week. Despite being a spin-off of the moderately successful Spencer for Hire, which had run for 3 seasons and established Avery Brooks as a compelling presence as Hawk, the new series struggled to find an audience from the very beginning. The ratings were disappointing, and the show failed to build momentum even as it aired its initial episodes. By May 13, 1989, just a little over 3 months after its premiere, the series aired its final episode and was canceled by ABC. Only 13 episodes were produced in total, making it one of the shortest-lived television spin-offs ever created. The brief run meant that storylines barely had time to develop. Characters beyond Hawk himself remained thinly sketched, and the show never got the opportunity to find its creative footing or build a loyal audience. For comparison, most television series are given at least a full season of 22 episodes to prove themselves, and even struggling shows often receive a second season to improve their ratings. A Man Called Hawk received no such grace period. The cancellation was swift and final, leaving Avery Brooks without the series that was supposed to establish him as a leading man on television. The failure was particularly frustrating because the show had ambitions beyond typical action fare and tried to explore themes of community, identity, and social justice in ways that were uncommon for late 80s television. Fact 7. Time Magazine's Worst Spinoff. List years after A Man Called Hawk disappeared from television screens. Time Magazine included it on their Top 10 Worst TV Spinoffs list, cementing the show's reputation as one of the more unsuccessful attempts to expand a television universe. The magazine's assessment was both critical and oddly specific, noting that the series was grim and violent, though not without an occasional xylophone interlude, a description that captures the show's strange tonal inconsistency. The xylophone comment was particularly cutting because it highlighted how the show tried to balance serious urban drama with jazz-influenced musical moments that sometimes felt out of place given the violent content of many episodes. Critics at the time and in retrospect struggled with what the show was trying to be. On one hand, it attempted to present Hawk as a complex character dealing with serious issues in Washington, D.C.'s African-American community. On the other hand, it was still fundamentally an action show that required violence and confrontation to drive its plots forward. This tension between thoughtful character study and action-oriented storytelling never resolved itself satisfactorily, leaving the show feeling uneven and unsure of its own identity. The Time Magazine recognition, though negative, at least acknowledged that the show existed and tried to do something different, even if it failed in execution. Being included on a worst spin-offs list put A Man Called Hawk in company with other failed attempts to capitalize on successful parent shows, a reminder that spin-offs are always risky ventures that require more than just taking a popular character and giving them their own series. The show's failure demonstrated that even strong source material, a talented lead actor, and good intentions aren't enough to guarantee success if the execution doesn't come together properly. Fact 8. Washington, D.C. was suddenly Hawk's hometown. When A Man Called Hawk was developed as a spin-off of Spencer for Hire, the creative team made a significant change to the character's background that contradicted everything previously established. The series relocated Hawk from Boston to Washington, D.C., and retroactively declared D.C. to be his hometown, a detail that had never been mentioned in Robert B. Parker's novels or during Hawk's entire run on Spencer for Hire. In the original show, Hawk operated in Boston as Spencer's occasional partner and sometime adversary, with no particular connection to Washington suggested at any point. The novels similarly kept Hawk's background deliberately vague, which was part of Parker's intention to maintain mystery around the character. But the spin-off needed a reason for Hawk to leave Boston and establish himself somewhere else. So the writers simply invented a DC connection out of whole cloth. The show presented Hawk as returning to his roots, reconnecting with his old neighborhood and the people who had known him before he became the polished, dangerous professional seen in Spencer for Hire. This retcon, as fans would call it today, created a contradiction that anyone familiar with the source material would immediately notice. Washington, D.C. provided a different urban landscape than Boston and gave the writers opportunities to explore themes related to the nation's capital, including politics and the particular challenges facing D.C.'s African-American community in the late 1980s. However, the decision to fundamentally rewrite Hawk's origin story felt arbitrary and demonstrated the kind of creative liberty that television productions often take with established characters when they're trying to launch a new series. The hometown angle was meant to give Hawk deeper roots and more personal stakes in the stories, but it came at the cost of consistency with everything that had come before. Fact 9. The character got an entire new backstory. Beyond just changing Hawk's hometown, A Man Called Hawk gave the character an entirely new backstory that added dimensions never seen before. The series revealed that Hawk was a Vietnam War veteran, giving him a military background that explained some of his combat skills and tactical thinking. This was never mentioned in Robert B. Parker's novels or in Spencer for Hire, where Hawk's past remained deliberately mysterious. The show also made Hawk an accomplished jazz piano player, featuring scenes of him playing in clubs and using music as a form of expression and connection to his community. This musical talent aligned with Avery Brooks's own abilities as a musician and gave the character a softer, more artistic side that contrasted with his dangerous reputation. Additionally, the series emphasized a spiritual dimension to Hawk that had been largely absent before. The show portrayed him as someone who thought deeply about morality, justice, and his place in the world, often having philosophical conversations with his mentor Old Man about life's bigger questions. These additions were clearly attempts to make Hawk more well-rounded and complex, transforming him from the enigmatic enforcer of the novels and original series into a fully realized protagonist with depth and vulnerability. The Vietnam veteran angle was particularly common for action characters in the 1980s, as Hollywood frequently used that war as background for characters who possessed combat skills and psychological complexity. The jazz musician element played into cultural expectations and stereotypes, but also gave Brooks opportunities to showcase his actual talents. The spiritual aspects were perhaps the most ambitious additions, trying to suggest that Hawk wasn't just muscle for hire, but someone wrestling with deeper questions about right and wrong, justice and mercy, violence and peace. Fact 10. Brooks taught college while filming Star Trek. Even as Avery Brooks was starring in Star Trek Deep Space Nine and becoming one of the most prominent black actors on television, he never abandoned his commitment to education and teaching. Brooks was a professor at Rutgers University's Mason Gross School of the Arts, where he taught acting and theater long before his television fame and continued teaching even while working on Deep Space Nine. His dedication to his students was so strong that he found creative ways to maintain his teaching responsibilities despite his demanding filming schedule. Brooks videotaped lessons and lectures for his students, ensuring they still received instruction even when he couldn't be physically present in the classroom. Some of these recordings were made while Brooks was still wearing his Starfleet uniform from the Deep Space Nine set, creating the surreal image of Captain Sisko teaching acting techniques to college students. This commitment to education revealed something fundamental about Brooks's character and priorities. Despite achieving success in Hollywood and starring in a major franchise, he viewed teaching as equally important work that he refused to give up. His students at Rutgers benefited from having an instructor who was actively working at the highest levels of television production and could bring real-world experience into his teaching. Brooks's approach to balancing these two careers demonstrated that he saw acting and teaching not as separate pursuits, but as interconnected parts of a larger commitment to the arts and to nurturing the next generation of performers. The fact that he would videotape lessons while still in costume shows both his dedication and his practical problem solving, finding ways to fulfill both responsibilities even when they seemed impossible to reconcile. Fact 11. Condemned by a religious leader. A Man Called Hawk attracted criticism from Mississippi Reverend Donald Wildman, a religious leader who became prominent in the 1980s and 90s for his campaigns against content he considered objectionable on television. Wildman denounced the show in strong terms, calling it vile and violent and immoral, and urged his followers to complain to ABC and the show's advertisers. His criticism focused on the level of violence depicted in the series and what he perceived as moral problems with how the show portrayed its characters and situations. Wildman was known for organizing boycotts and letter-writing campaigns targeting shows and advertisers, making him a controversial figure who sparked debates about censorship, free speech, and what content was appropriate for broadcast television. What makes his criticism of A Man Called Hawk particularly ironic is that many television critics at the time actually complained that the show tried too hard to make Hawk seem like a nice guy, softening the character's dangerous edge and moral ambiguity from the novels and Spencer for Hire. The series attempted to present Hawk as a community-minded person who used his skills to protect his neighborhood and help people in need, often emphasizing his positive qualities rather than dwelling on his more ruthless nature. This disconnect between Wildman's accusations of immorality and critics' complaints about the show being too wholesome highlights how subjective these judgments were. For Wildman, any violence and the very premise of a character who operated outside traditional law enforcement was inherently problematic. For others, the show was neutering an interesting character by making him too conventional and heroic, removing the complexity that made Hawk compelling in the first place. Fact 12. Parker exceeded his own creation. Despite Robert B. Parker's harsh criticism of A Man Called Hawk as a television series, he had nothing but praise for Avery Brooks's portrayal of the character itself. Parker was genuinely astonished by what Brooks brought to Hawk, telling interviewers that the actor not only met his expectations, but exceeded them in ways he never imagined possible. Parker said that Brooks became even more Hawk than the book character was, which is remarkable praise from an author discussing an actor's interpretation of a character he created and knew intimately. What impressed Parker most was the depth and nuance that Brooks added to Hawk through his performance. The character in the novels was intentionally enigmatic and defined largely by what he didn't say and didn't reveal about himself. Brooks somehow captured that essential mystery while also adding layers of intelligence, danger, dignity, and complexity that made Hawk feel even more real and compelling than Parker's written descriptions. The author admitted that Brooks understood things about Hawk that he himself hadn't fully articulated on the page, bringing dimensions to the character through body language, tone of voice, and subtle expressions that writing alone couldn't capture. This praise makes Parker's criticism of the spin-off series even more pointed. It wasn't Brooks's performance that Parker objected to, but rather the writing, production choices, and fundamental concept of giving Hawk his own show. Parker felt that Brooks was perfect as Hawk and proved it repeatedly on Spencer for Hire, but that the spin-off series failed to use that perfect performance in service of good stories that understood what made the character work. The disconnect between Parker's admiration for Brooks and his disdain for the series perfectly captured the tragedy of A Man Called Hawk. Fact 13. Bill Duke directed before becoming famous. Among the directors who worked on A Man Called Hawk during its brief 13-episode run was Bill Duke, who at that point was still early in his transition from actor to director, but would later become one of Hollywood's most respected directors. Duke directed at least one episode of the series, gaining valuable experience in television direction that would serve him well in his future career. Within just a few years of A Man Called Hawk, Duke would direct theatrical films that earned critical acclaim, including A Rage in Harlem in 1991 and Deep Cover in 1992, both of which showcased his distinctive visual style and strong work with actors. He went on to direct episodes of countless hit television series, becoming one of the most in-demand episodic directors in the industry, with credits including everything from X-Files to Law and Order to Black Lightning, and many others. Duke's work on A Man Called Hawk represents an interesting moment in his career trajectory, when he was establishing himself behind the camera while still being primarily known as a character actor. His presence on the show also speaks to the opportunities that series provided for black directors at a time when such opportunities were extremely limited in Hollywood. Having someone like Duke involved in the production added credibility and demonstrated that A Man Called Hawk, whatever its other problems, was committed to hiring black creative talent both in front of and behind the camera. Looking back, Duke's involvement feels like a footnote in an impressive career, but at the time, it was part of his steady building of a directorial resume that would eventually make him one of the most accomplished black directors working in American film and television. Fact 14. Hawk returned in 4 TV movies. After A Man Called Hawk was canceled in May of 1989, you might think that was the end of Avery Brooks playing the character, but Hawk's story was far from over. Between 1993 and 1995, while Brooks was starring as Captain Sisko on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, he reprised his role as Hawk in 4 made-for-television movies based on Robert B. Parker's Spencer novels. These TV movies brought back Robert Urich as Spencer and reunited the partnership that had worked so well on Spencer for Hire from 1985 to 1988. The 4 movies were Spencer Ceremony, Spencer, Pale Kings and Princes, Spencer the Judas Goat, and Spencer A Savage Place, all adapting Parker's novels and restoring the dynamic between Spencer and Hawk that fans had loved. Brooks filmed these movies during breaks in the production schedule of Deep Space Nine, managing to balance 2 different iconic characters in 2 different franchises simultaneously. What's particularly interesting is that these TV movies completely ignored the existence of A Man Called Hawk as a series. There was no mention of Hawk having had his own adventures in Washington, D.C., no references to the characters or situations from the spinoff show, and Hawk was simply back in Boston working with Spencer, as if the spinoff had never happened. This erasure suggests that everyone involved recognized that A Man Called Hawk hadn't worked, and that the character functioned much better in his original context as Spencer's partner rather than as a solo protagonist. The TV movies allowed Brooks to play Hawk the way he and the audience preferred, without the baggage of the failed spinoff hanging over the character. Fact 15. Old Man Called Dax. Old Man. To Star Trek Deep Space Nine, fans who were familiar with A Man Called Hawk couldn't help but notice a peculiar connection between the 2 shows that played out in Avery Brooks's dialogue. In A Man Called Hawk, Brooks's character called his mentor figure Old Man, a term of respect and affection for the elderly character played by Moses Gunn, who served as Hawk's spiritual guide and father figure. Years later on Deep Space Nine, Brooks's Captain Sisko had a close friendship with the Trill character Jadzia Dax, and his nickname for her was also Old Man, which he used throughout the series run. The nickname made perfect sense within the context of Star Trek because Dax was a joined Trill, meaning she was a young woman who carried a symbiont that had lived for centuries in multiple host bodies, giving her the memories and wisdom of someone much older. Sisko had been friends with Dax's previous host, Curzon Dax, an elderly male Trill who had been his mentor, so calling Jadzia Old Man was his way of acknowledging their long friendship that transcended the current host body. But for viewers who remembered A Man Called Hawk, hearing Brooks use the exact same term of endearment created an unintentional echo between the two characters and their relationships with their respective mentors. It's almost certainly just a coincidence, as the Deep Space Nine writers were drawing on the established backstory of Sisko and Curzon Dax, rather than deliberately referencing an obscure canceled series from a few years earlier. Still, the parallel created a meta-textual connection that some fans found amusing, and that demonstrated how certain patterns of relationship and dialogue followed Brooks across different roles.